Number 95, the House of Commons Standing Committee on Government Operations and Estimates, also known as the mighty OGGO, the only committee that matters. Pursuant to Standing Order 108.3c and the motion adopted by the committee on Monday, October 17, 2023, the committee is meeting on the study of the changeover of the Public Service Healthcare Plan from Sun Life to Canada Life. A reminder not to put your earpieces next to the microphone as it causes feedback and potential injury to our highly valued translators. For the next round of witnesses, they're already online, and I'll let you know they have completed the required mic checks. At the very end of the meeting, I just need about 30 seconds just to approve a budget item. We have two opening statements, Ms. Royds and Ms. Girard. Please go ahead, Ms. Royds, for 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and committee members. I am pleased to be here today alongside my colleagues from the Treasury Board Secretariat to support your important study into the Government of Canada contract awarded to Canada Life for the administration of the Public Service Healthcare Plan. Let me begin by acknowledging that given we are meeting in the National Capital Region, we are gathered on the unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe peoples. Je suis accompagnée aujourd'hui de Pascal.
Today, I am accompanied by Pascal Achambault, Acting Director General of the Business and Technology Solutions Sector at PSPC. As a common service provider for procurement, Public Services and Procurement Canada, or PSPC, plays an important role in the daily operations of the Government of Canada, supporting federal departments and agencies to deliver their mandates. As the central purchaser, PSPC manages on average approximately $25 billion annually in procurements of goods and services on behalf of client departments.
In ensuring the delivery of the Public Service Healthcare Plan, the largest healthcare plan in Canada, is therefore a core priority to us. I would like to outline a few key facts related to the procurement of the administrator for the plan. As part of our commitment to open, fair, and transparent competitive processes, Canada began the process to retender this requirement in 2018. This extensive multi-year procurement process included multiple rounds of industry engagement on the administrative service requirements, industry best practices, socioeconomic objectives including Indigenous participation in greening, and our proposed procurement approach. In addition, at the request of industry, we postponed the RFP release by 6 months due to the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. 3 bids were submitted by major players in the healthcare plan administration space, and which were evaluated against the government's technical and financial criteria. Significantly, all 3 bids were found to be compliant, with the bid from Canada Life ultimately ranking first. The contract was awarded to Canada Life on November 30th, 2021. The current contract is valued at $514 million for 8.5 years, and there are options available to extend the contract. Je tiens à souligner qu'il s'agissait.
I would like to underscore the fact that this was a competitive process with 3 compliant bidders evaluated against rigorous criteria established by both the technical authority at the Treasury Board Secretariat and the contracting authority at PSPC. It should be noted that the contract included a startup phase of 18 months for Canada Life to take the necessary steps to prepare to administer the plan. The operations phase began on the 1st of July 2023 and includes a 6-month transition period.
From one service provider to another, especially on programs of this magnitude, issues with transition are not unexpected and are therefore planned for by all parties. PSPC and Treasury Board Secretariat have worked in close collaboration with Canada Life through this period to improve service for members, as well as to ensure communications on plan design changes that are the Government of Canada's, or that are the responsibility, of the Government of Canada. In fact, as of today, Canada Life has advised the government that call centre wait times are 1 to 3 minutes, and their average claims processing time is 2.2 days. There is still work to do, and we have lessons learned that will be applied both to this contract and to other major transitions, but we are trending towards the service level that members expect and have the processes and mechanisms in place to respond as issues arise. Mr. Chair, in everything we do, our overriding aim is clear. It is to provide the goods and services departments need to deliver their programs at the best value to Canadians. We are committed to continuing to work closely with both the Treasury Board Secretariat and Canada Life to ensure that plan members receive the services that they deserve. Thank you, and I'll now turn to my colleague.
Thanks, Ms. Sherrod. Before you start, congratulations on your appointment as President of Public Service Commission. The things people will do to get away from appearing in OGGO more often. Anyways, congratulations sincerely, and we'll turn the floor over to you for 5 minutes.
Thank you, sir, and I will look forward for the validation of the two houses for indeed this appointment. So thank you for your kind words. Bonjour, good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and members of the committee for inviting me to appear before you today. Before I begin my remarks, I would like to acknowledge that we are gathered on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. With me today, David Prest, Executive Director of Benefit Plans Policy and Programs at the Office of the Chief Human Resource Officer in the TBS. I'm pleased to be here with my colleagues from PSPC. Mr. Chair, the Public Service Healthcare Plan, better known as PSHCP, is a negotiated, optional employer-sponsored healthcare plan. It provides supplementary coverage following coverage paid by provinces and territories where plan members live. The plan is part of the total compensation package that the Government of Canada provides to employees to help us recruit and retain talent. My department supports the President of the Treasury Board and the Treasury Board itself as the plan sponsor. TBS is also the project authority, meaning it oversees the performance of the plan administrator in collaboration of the PSHCP Administration Authority and the PSPC. The Government of Canada has an obligation to competitively retender the benefit plan contracts, and PSPC, as Molly said, award the contract to Canada Life. Our colleagues will be able to speak more in detail about that process. La transition vers la Canada Vie, nouvel administrateur depuis le 1er juillet.
The transition to Canada Life, the new administrator since July 1st of this year, proved to be a major initiative that affected the 1.7 million people who participate in the plan. And it's the first time we've had a new administrator in 27 years. Regardless of the change of administrator, the plan, what it covers, had not yet been modernized since 2006, in spite of the significant progress that was achieved in the healthcare sector. As a result, the employer, bargaining agents, and retiree representatives negotiated and recommended changes through the PSHCP Partners Committee, which were approved by the Treasury Board. The modernized PSHCP came into effect on July 1st, 2023, and, amongst others, offers enhanced mental health and wellness support, as well as support that will benefit seniors, families, young adults, people with disabilities, and members of the 2 LGBTQIA+ community. In addition, market-tested cost-cutting measures such as physiotherapy, mandatory generics, and prior authorization are in line with industry standards and are designed to ensure the long-term viability of the plan. We know that the transition to Canada Life, the new administrator, was a vast and complex undertaking, and that is why we began working with Canada Life partners 18 months before entry into force of the contract. That is also why when our staff and Canada Life reported problems like deadlines and reimbursement wait times, immediately we implemented daily meetings with Canada Life officials and PSPC and the Treasury Board. We continue to meet regularly, and together we have developed a plan of action to resolve the problems. And that is also why the contract includes a 6-month transition period, which is standard industry practice. Thanks to this plan, which provided to recruit additional staff for the call center and for the processing of files, Canada Life has told us that since the 1st of December, the average wait time on the phone was which was 1 to 3 minutes, and that claims are being processed a lot more quickly.
By Canada Life over the several months to minimize the risk of delays with claims, refunds, and to improve the members' experience. At RM, and in collaboration with PSPC bargaining agents and the National Association of Federal Retirees, we strengthened our communications efforts to clarify and distinguish between plan changes and administrator changes. Mr. Chair, there are always lessons to be learned from an undertaking of this size that can be applied to future large projects. For example, although a significant number of communications...
I apologize. I have to ask you to wrap up.
Okay. Although we communicated broadly, it seems that it was still not enough. So we're redoubling efforts in that regard. So I'll close by emphasizing that we continue to working with Canada Life. We see a clear path forward towards a steady state, and I'll be ready to answer any questions that you have. Thank you. Merci. Miigwech.
Thanks very much. We'll start with Mrs. Kusi for 6, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much to our witnesses for being here today. I think it's very courageous that you're here, but also very important because we have heard, Canadians have heard so publicly and so insistently how this transition has not been ideal, and it's how it has left many public servants, many of those who have served Canada, as well as their families suffering. And I'd like to mention just a couple of stories mentioned in the media. Carl Henselt, who suffers from Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, says without specific medication, she can suffer up to 20 migraines a month. I'm a chronically ill public servant in the midst of medical retirement. Every month, I rely on medication for cardiac, neurological, musculoskeletal, and pain reasons, along with my husband's PSHCP and my own. We were adequately covered under Sun Life. Since July 1st, however, it has been nothing short of a nightmare. I've been able to get through to a representative once since July 1st, after being on hold for ages. I'm now almost 2 weeks late on my medication injection for migraines because they state that BC Pharmacare now covers it. I've talked to Pharmacare, and they state my insurance should continue to cover it until my deductible is met. Both myself and the drug company have sent them a special authority letter, as well as my pharmacy, but they still continue to deny this treatment to me. Without it, I have approximately 15 to 20 migraines per month. We are definitely not getting what we were paying for, and it's unacceptable. Adam Shales also writes, his father spoke about his 9-year-old son who relies on weekly intensive physiotherapy to counteract the debilitating nature of his cerebral palsy. Under the terms of the PSHCP, the family was covered at about 80% for claims up to $500 and claims over $1,000. As of July 1st, it's now capped at $1,500 annually. It's a major source of stress. We don't have lots of money sitting around, so either we have to borrow for that or we have to reduce the amount of physio, and then which has consequences and impacts on his body, his muscles, his range of motion, and ultimately the quality of his life. So we are hearing firsthand from public servants how this is affecting them and their families, and of course we want to care for Canadians. My first question is, why was it reported by Minister Anand in the beginning of November that there was only one bidder for the contract, despite being confirmed here today the involvement of 3 competitive bidders were in the process? And whoever would like to take it, please.
So I'll start by addressing the question in relation to the number of bidders. There were 3 compliant bidders associated with this particular process. I don't know the context of the comment by the minister, but I can confirm that we had a separate tendering process associated with the dental care plan for public service and pensioners dental, where there was one compliant bidder, where Canada Life was the winning bidder in that scenario. So perhaps there may be a misunderstanding between the two plans, but I can confirm for this one there were 3 compliant bidders, and I believe my colleague wants to address the beginning portion of your question. Thank you.
Thank you. You indeed raised some of the difficulties that have been experienced in the implementation of the plans, but the 2 cases that you've presented to us speak about exactly the 2 situations that were happening, the 2 types of changes that were happening at the same time. So for the first one, which relates more to what the plan covers. So this is the modernization of the plan that had not been done since 2006, that we did separately, that is negotiated, and that we asked Canada Life to implement as of July 1st. So it present a new plan, of course, requires some training, and we understand that the previous administrator had 27 years of implementing the same plan.
Madame Gerard, I just wanted to go back to the negotiation process, specifically regarding physiotherapy and drug substitutions. Can you provide some insight as to what that process was, please?
Yes, I'll begin, and maybe David will want to supplement. So previously, actually, the physiotherapy modernization of the measure is an enhancement for the vast majority of plan users, and particularly of physio services. We had the Association of Physiotherapy providing us with data prior to the negotiations. We had benchmarking studies. We had also usage analysis. And for physio, what we were covering before was a $500 amount, and then you had a corridor where for $500 you had to be out of pocket, which then took you to a larger amount. Many people, $500 these days for physio, for the vast majority, was insufficient. So what was negotiated is to actually abolish the corridor and offer $1,500 to all plan members for physiotherapy, allowing the vast majority and the industry standard being much lower. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, $1,200.
It's actually twice the limit.
It's twice. So we're covering twice the average amount.
Thanks very much. That is our time. Mr. Baines, please, for 6.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for joining us today. Indeed, this changeover has caused considerable concerns, even for my constituents, family members, friends who work in the CBSA and other public servants. My first question, maybe I'll direct it to Ms. Royds, is during your opening remarks, you noted that there's a period of transition to Canada Life which began in July. Is it normal to have a transition period? And did you plan for a transition period as part of this contract?
Thank you for the question. So as I indicated in my opening remarks, when we are embarking on a program of this complexity, we absolutely would expect there to be a transition period given some of the uncertainty that would have been associated with the planning parameters that went into that. And so we have a transition period of 6 months, which will come to an end in January within the contract. And we have been working, as I indicated, with Treasury Board Secretariat and Canada Life to make the necessary adjustments as we have been through this transition period.
Okay, and what measurables are available to the federal government should Canada Life Insurance Company continue to be unable to administer the public service healthcare plan in accordance with its contractual obligations?
So in terms of the measures that are available to Canada, we do have provisions in the contract associated with the performance under the contract, and that is something that we would be looking at after we exit the transition period, which again ranges from anything from we have some fee credits and some other provisions available to us. But I would like to stress that given the uncertainty and the transition period that we are in, that we'll be looking at that together with our colleagues from the Treasury Board Secretariat and taking stock of the situation once we enter into the January period.
So the 6-month period of transition now. Is there a lead-up transition, what's the lead-up time?
So prior to the transition period, there was a startup phase of approximately 18 months where Canada Life prepared to take on the claims administration, and that's when they would have undertaken the work necessary, including standing up the call center and some of the solutions necessary to do the benefits processing.
Do you
and there
think
were
that was
deliverables
enough?
associated with that as well.
Do you think that 18 months lead-up was enough?
As we entered into the transition phase, there was no indication of any concerns. I think that we have some important lessons learned about the transition phase, but I think at this stage it's too soon to say whether or not there was more time needed for the 18 months. I don't know if my Treasury Board colleagues have a view on the length of time for the startup phase at this stage, but I think it's too soon for us to make a comment on that.
We certainly observed that the combination of the new plan, although it had to be brought and managed this way, brought additional pressure on the administrator to deliver. However, 18 months gave a lot of opportunity to discuss and find solutions, and we have been, there were dozens of committees working together to prepare for that, but we do realize that for a plan of this magnitude, it's 1.7 million members. It's the largest employer benefit plan in Canada. It's a massive endeavor.
And were there, during that 18 months, hiccups that you saw, action taken? Was there measurables on how many? Was there 150 times or instances that this didn't work, that didn't work? Is there a number attached to that?
So Canada Life provided the Government of Canada with an integrated schedule of all of their deliverables. And as we were approaching the July 1st date, there were a number of less priority items that the government was willing to defer until after the date in order for Canada Life to focus on some of the more important deliverables, for example, privacy and security concerns, making sure that those were in place to safeguard the health information of plan members, ensuring that plan members were properly communicated with. Those types of core deliverables were really the focus of Canada Life leading up to the July 1st date.
Okay. There's been discussions in committee if there's value for money for Canadians. I want to, what did you do to ensure that Canadians will get value from this $514 million contract?
I will, from a contract perspective, it was retendered with the most accurate and up-to-date standards and criteria. From a plan design perspective, when we started this negotiation with bargaining agents and NAFR, the retirees, it was clear that having had the same administrator for many years and the best practices in the industry, the contract have not been retendered. There were some improvements in the administration and the efficiencies, the fraud detection, the technology evolved so much that we needed to see introduced here as better administrative practices. So that's what we did. That's what mandatory generic substitution is. We were the only ones lagging behind, not having it. That's an example.
Thanks, Rich. Sorry, thank you very much, Mr. Baines. If I could speak today. Ms. Vignola, please, for 6.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Sir, ma'am, thank you for being here with us. Ms. Royce, besides Canada Life, who else submitted a bid to be the administrator for the public health plan?
I'm afraid that I'm not able to disclose the names of the other bidders. This is information we have to hold confidential.
Quand exactement a débuté la période de...
When exactly did the transition period start and when does it end?
So the transition period began on the 1st of July and it is until January. So a 6-month period of transition was anticipated under the contract.
OK, et le 18 mois, donc...
And the 18 months you talked about in your remarks, what does that concern exactly? The 18 months, when did the 18 months start running?
So the Actually, perhaps I'll turn to my colleague, Madame Archambault, just to go through the phases, including the timing associated with the 18 months. I don't have the exact date. Do you have the exact date of the start of the 18 months?
C'était au début. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. It was at the beginning of November 2021 that the contract entered into force. The startup phase was really to prepare. No claims were made at that time. It was just to prepare everything, put together the process, recruit staff, and everything. Fine. Do you have an idea of the number of Francophone employees who were recruited? No, I do not. They will be appearing afterwards. You could ask them that question because the numbers have increased. That changed throughout the process. The employees were doubled. What we know is that we are trying to offer the same quality of service in French and in English.
Disons qu'avec les commentaires que je reçois,
With the comments I'm receiving by email, well, I'll let that go. For those who administer the plan, are they trained to take into account recommendations from professional associations or the health institutions, or they're simply formed to apply the rules? Once again, you could ask for those details with the people from Canada Life. They are trained to be able to answer questions when it comes to eligibility for all the measures. The employer nor the administrator cannot play the role of medical experts, but they have scripts. They have answers, but sometimes individual experiences of different people may require validation, may require a better understanding of the situation, because as we know, healthcare is a very complex matter. We are not the ones who make that determination. That is done by medical doctors. Well, in some cases, people who need drugs, essential drugs, drugs that are essential for their lives and their survival, they are asked to use generic drugs, which have so many secondary side effects and sometimes become dangerous. Instead of understanding that, they ask for more paperwork. In the meantime, those people do not have the drugs they need to survive. So they are given the choice between, well, give me the paperwork to prove that you need this to survive and that you don't need the generic drug, or you take the generic drug and it's going to have the same effect as if you did not take the drug. So you will die. So do you understand the situation? Yes, I do understand. Mr. Chair, that's the second comment I'm hearing about generic substitutions. I could give a more comprehensive answer. Do I have time? A minute. When it comes to mandatory generic substitution, once again, this is one of the best practices in the industry. Generic drugs are drugs that are approved by Health Canada, and they are convenient or appropriate for most people. But mandatory substitution will only enter into force on the 1st of January 2024. So once again, there's a transition period to be able to communicate with people, to educate people, and give members the opportunity to go see a physician or a nurse practitioner to discuss the feasibility of transferring towards a generic drug. If that is not possible, there is a short version of a form, just one page. Once a physician provides a medical reason, the people may be exempted. In the meantime, the people are still waiting for their drugs. Now we have a process to allow for people to be considered a priority if it's a situation where the life or health of the person is in danger. We use the escalation process. So you are telling us that from the 1st of December, people are not waiting for months to get an answer, because we have people here who made requests on the 22nd of October, and they received the response saying that applications were still being processed. Are you guaranteeing that we will not have such delays anymore?
First, we've had Phoenix where employees couldn't get paid for work they've done. Now we've got federal government employees. These are people that, have dedicated their lives to serve their fellow Canadians. They've had an absolute nightmare accessing their benefits. Now, the trust that public servants have with their employer, which is the government of Canada, it's evaporating. It's costing talent. You talked about this as being a really important tool to attracting workers, and by all extension, all Canadians benefit from this talent. It needs to be fixed. And I just think that when we look at all of the constituent stories that you're hearing around the table today, it just is a reminder of how necessary a pharmacare plan is for all Canadians, because this is just public servants. Imagine Canadians that can't access any medicine. This is critical that we move forward with a pharmacare plan so that nobody is left without getting their medication and in this situation. I guess my question to you is, to start, what compensation can we expect for public servants and retirees who've suffered or paid interest out of pocket because of Canada Life's inability to process benefits in a timely way?
I'll let my colleagues speak about what they're doing to make sure that the taxpayers the taxpayers' monies are well managed. Now, with regards to compensation, I can assure you that every person, although as regrettably as this has been, and we're not denying that, but that was owed monies based on the plan parameters and the admissibility, has been or will be made whole. They are reimbursing everything that was due according to the plan. It might have taken longer, but they will get their reimbursement. We understand now that they're treating the request much faster.
That is great to hear. Now, here's something else that I want to know about. There were people that were covered for certain drugs or benefits prior to with Sun Life. Some that have left their other plan, maybe their partner had a plan, and they decided to go with this plan based on Sun Life's options. Now they're no longer fully covered for the same prescriptions. What are you going to do for those public servants, those people on the plan that are now, not getting the full access to the benefits they had before?
Actually, we enhanced by 50 measures. The plan, no,
but specifically, maybe you're offering more, but there is circumstances right now. We're hearing from people that they are paying above what they did before. Will you make sure that in any situation like that, that you're going to top it up and make sure that isn't happening? Can you give certainty to that?
I cannot make this commitment because those are individual cases, medical situations, and it's not for the employer to make that determination. But everything that was covered before remains covered. David,
so you can make certainty. I need to hear that today. Certainty that anything that was covered under Sun Life before, under the previous plan, will be covered under this plan. I want confirmation of that.
Well, I explained that there are adjustments in the administration of the plan that has been made. It was outdated. It was not imposing the most rigorous stewardship on the public purse that it needed to. But in terms of benefits, there have been 50 enhancements.
An updated plan can't be one that is going to cause harm or less benefits to those people that are working in the public service. So I'm going to come back to you and hope that this gets fixed, and maybe we can deal with you individually on those issues. You can talk maybe about what happened in the year and a half of transition preparations. Were there not requirements? Did they meet them? Why not more oversight or penalties? And sorry about so many questions. I think you're going to wrap it into one because you're going to see the theme. What are the compliance standards in the contract? And why did you give Canada Life a 6-month grace period to meet them? And I guess at this point, is Canada Life even close to meeting those standards? And what can we expect to be the consequences for them if they don't meet them?
I think my colleague can wrap that thematic up with a few answers.
So thank you very much for the question. So in terms of the startup phase, as was previously indicated, there was an integrated schedule and plan associated with that, and there were milestones. There were a number of items that were focused on from an essential perspective. Don't have the full assessment yet of the startup in terms of exactly how many of the milestones were met exactly, but that's work that we are doing with our colleagues at Treasury Board in terms of ensuring the appropriate due diligence, and that's part of our role in terms of ensuring the proper stewardship of taxpayers' money. In terms of the service criteria, I'll address the transition phase first, which you asked about, which is why is there a transition period? A transition period is required given the fact that we were undertaking a transition of this magnitude, and there would have been no ability for a vendor to sign on to a forecast that was not one of their making. So we anticipated this transition period to make necessary adjustments, as I indicated before. And when we hit the service, when the standards come into place, that will be in January, and there's a number of specific measures associated with individual types of claims processing. There's different ones depending on the activities that are required by Canada Life, and I cannot comment on how close they are to each of them because there's a number of them, and there's a range of different requirements that are made, but certainly, as has been indicated, we do have improvements in the performance and the service being delivered, and we are trending in the right direction at this stage.
Thanks, Ms. Reutz. Ms. Block, go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I join my colleagues in welcoming our witnesses here today. Ms. Reutz, in your opening comments, you described the bidding process. Can you tell me or tell the committee why is it that Sun Life, the provider for the public service health care plan since 1996, and has been noted, the largest plan in Canada, why did they not bid on this new contract?
Thank you for the question. So as I indicated in my opening remarks, we had 3 compliant bidders associated with this competitive procurement. I'm afraid I'm not able to comment on the other bidders that participated, and that's part of the confidentiality requirements of the RFP and an obligation as well under our trade agreement. Canada Life was determined to have met in the total overall score the financial and technical requirements and criteria in the RFP and as evaluated by the teams from PSPC and Treasury Board Secretariat.
Can you tell the committee who made the decision to go with Canada Life, who was ultimately responsible for that final decision?
So again, it was a competitive process, and they were evaluated as having been the top-ranked bidder within that process. Due to the value of this particular contract, we did require the authority of the Treasury Board in order to award the contract, so we did go through that process, and then ultimately PSPC awarded the contract to Canada Life.
Thank you very much. I assume that the benefits, these benefits in particular that are covered in this plan, are part of negotiations between the government and the unions. Parliamentarians have received many complaints, as has been noted by my colleagues, from members about changes from the Sun Life plan to the Canada Life plan. Were the reductions in the services provided put forward by the government or the unions? So the reductions in the drugs that were covered or the services provided, were those put forward by the government or the unions?
The way the plan is managed as part of the governance, the policy, so what is covered by the plan is indeed negotiated under the purview of the Partners Committee of the PSHCP. It includes representatives from bargaining agents, NAFER, the National Retiree Federation, and the employer. It's negotiated there. We provide a recommendation if we can land on, a proposal, a joint proposal, which we did. We provided to the president of the Treasury Board, who in turn presented to the Treasury Board. So they were part of it, and because we, on an ongoing basis, oversee the policy of the plan. They were aware also, and they received the same benchmarking analysis. It's at those meetings that we will receive, we will welcome, for example, the Association of Physiotherapists or Massage Therapists and present to us the evolution and the advancements in their field. So they have exactly the same information as the employer when we begin negotiation. And it was a consensual recommendation to the President of the Treasury Board.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chair, how much time do I have?
You have 1 minute.
Okay, thank you. It is my understanding that the industry standard is not to conduct manual enrollment when transitioning plans, but that this was a requirement put in place by the federal government. I do understand that the purpose of which was to use the transition to refresh data and use Canada Life to remove those who should no longer be eligible for benefits. Canada Life was required to delay payments for thousands of claims until they completed prepayment audits, which was not a requirement when Sun Life was the administrator. In hindsight, do you think this was a mistake?
So on this, first, I believe that Sun Life had, during the extensive period that they delivered on this, had to update their information and their enrollment information of the members.
I'm afraid that is our time. Perhaps you can get back to the committee in writing
Indeed.
with this.
Perfect. Thank
Mr.
you.
Sousa, please, for 5.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the witnesses for appearing before us. I appreciate it. And it is obviously a very topical issue for many, all of us in this room, somewhat affected as a consequence of this transition. And we appreciate the challenges and also the ways that are being taken to overcome those challenges. In following up on the previous questioner, my colleague, you've spoken about the differences between PSPC and Treasury Board as they relate to this contract. Maybe it would be helpful to have some greater clarity then as to, maybe you can explain those different roles between Treasury Board and PSPC in terms of what has taken place, how it's come to be. People are worried about the procurement process not taking into account other issues. Maybe you can clarify all of that here.
Why don't I start and then turn to Marie-Chantal from a Treasury Board Secretariat perspective. So in terms of our respective roles here, PSPC is the contracting authority, so we're responsible for ensuring a open, fair, transparent procurement process. In this case, it was a competitive process, as well as we are supporting our colleagues in terms of the stewardship of the contract and ensuring that we are appropriately managing our contractual relationship with Canada Life. And again, this is one of great complexity in a large program. So the teams are meeting daily with the supplier, PSPC, Treasury Board, as well as with Canada Life. And so there's a number of initiatives that are ongoing, but we're responsible for supporting the due diligence needed and the stewardship and ensuring the performance against the contract itself. And I'll turn to Marie-Chantal in terms of their role as the employer.
So as the employer, we offer of course, the terms and conditions of employment that we offer to our employees include their salaries, but also a pension and benefits. There are several benefit plans. There are some in different organizations, but for the core public administration, we have health, dental, and disability benefits. It's good practice in the industry, and it's an obligation for us as stewardship of the public purse to retender those on, let's say, a more regular basis. We know that there are innovations, that the systems are improving. So to ensure that, we're asked by the Treasury Board to retender at a certain pace. The PSHCP being the largest one, we started there because it was outdated, and we had indeed to update that contract and make Canadians and employees benefit from better industry practices. So we started there, then we did dental that we just announced, and we'll move to disability later down the road. So it's a regular and structured process to make sure that the contracts that we sign on behalf of Canadians remain competitive on the market.
Thank you for that. And we've spoken about what's happened after July 1st, raising issues in respect. Some have been unable to reach Canada Life, some of the log waits and the wait times to the call centers and so forth. And we heard already about the situation. You've already mentioned that situation hasn't improved somewhat. Maybe can you provide more specifics to the committee then as to what's been done and where the delays and wait times stand currently?
Absolutely. So we have seen an evolution clearly in the nature of the issues, and that has allowed us to monitor progress. Many things have been done. So first, Canada Life more than doubled the staff that they put both call centers, but also for the treatment of claims themselves. So those are two different functions. They increased and provided more in-depth training as well in those two areas, both at the call centers to be able to better answer, questions from our members, but also the adjudication process. Hours of operations have been extended throughout the summer until September, and now until December 17th, evening, weekends, they remain open. They've also, what we've observed by analyzing on a weekly basis what was happening is that there were multiple doors of entry. So we shut down 2 doors, chat and email, to only have phone calls, and instead of having people treat the same request many times, only have it once. And we've talked about letters and communications with pharmacists.
That's our time, Mr. Souza. Thanks very much. Mrs. Vignola for 2.5, please.
Merci beaucoup. Je vais revenir sur ma dernière.
Thank you very much. I'll come back to my last question. Someone who applied for reimbursement on the 22nd of October received an email saying, no, we are not with you yet. We are only treating things for the 15th of September. Now, so are you telling me that people are not going to have to wait 5 weeks anymore for their claims to be processed? I would use the dashboard that we have been given, that we're given every day by Canada Life. And on the 29th of November, they had processed 13,000. They had reduced the backlog. And the processing time was 2.2 days, guaranteed. That's the data I have. Ms. Royce, you talked about the compliance criteria used during the transition phase. Did that concern Canada Life? Is that study ready or available for the committee?
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. For now, we do not have any such report. When we are done with the transition period and when we have dealt with all that, there's information we may not be able to disclose because it is going to be confidential information. Madam Gerard, the dashboard that you presented, is it possible to send that to us, please? I believe so. And I also like to tell you that since a week and a half now, Canada Life is posting on its website its performance indicators and data. In October 2023, the Senate administration provided resources to help senators and their staff to deal with the issues related to the change of administrator for the plan. But we have retirees, employees who did not receive the same support from their union. It is important to understand that if we have to support the Senate, it may be because ordinary people are still having lots of difficulty. That was just a comment.
Mr. Johns for 2.5, please.
Yeah, so Canada Life was well aware of the size, customer service expectations, and expected challenges related to significant plan redesign of this contract. Yet Canada Life reported the first significant wave of hiring, and it started really only weeks before July 1st. So I'm concerned why they, didn't take serious efforts to staff up its customer service center in advance of the handover date of July 1st. And I guess in the same vein, it's standard practice for plan administrators to put out informational resources to help plan members understand their benefits. Now, while the PSHCP Administrative Authority and Treasury Board provide this service to plan members, industry best practices are for plan administrators to also educate their plan members. Why did Canada Life not take this initiative? And is this a case of Canada Life only doing the bare minimum as required by the contract? Or is Canada Life incentivized to not educate members, given the fees Canada Life is able to charge for customer support interactions when plan members need to call in for clarity?
Thank you. Several of the questions that you ask are really directed towards Canada Life and their management practices. So perhaps open that with them, those questions. But I will say that we also noted the need for more communications and adapted communications. We had communicated extensively, but still, we know that practices are changing and habits are changing. We know that longer communications or more complex, let's say technical ones, are less easy to understand, so we will adapt and learn from that.
I'm hoping that you can make it, put pressure on them to do better at this. Plan members have reported receiving denials, again, I raised this earlier, for life-saving medications and treatments that were previously covered when the plan was administered by Sun Life. Some of these treatments are subject to plan directives that have not changed. So I guess why is Canada Life taking such an extremely restrictive approach to cover exceptions? And back to when I talked about people with their plan and our spousal plan, we've heard of people that actually aren't getting any coverage because they go to Canada Life first and then they're barred from their other plan. How are you going to fix that? Because this shouldn't be happening.
I'm afraid we're out of time for Mr. Johns, but perhaps you can get back to the committee. I imagine your department probably has an action plan for this. Perhaps you could share that with us. And just coming back to Ms. Vignola, as you were waving around the dashboard, perhaps you could table that as well. Mrs. Kusi, please, for 5 minutes, and then we'll go to Mr. Kusmirchuk.
Thank you very much. I was interested in the type of consultation that you did with public servants, please, prior to implementing this new plan.
Before the negotiation of the plan, right? Not
What
the
did it look
contract
like, though,
part.
please? Can you provide specifics as to formats? Was there a survey administered? Was there a roundtable? How did these consultations take place, please?
I will start, and my colleague will complete my answer if need be. So it's at Partners Committee, with the support of the Administration Authority, that we receive information on an ongoing basis on how the plan is doing. And, for example, for years we heard how many appeals that we receive. This is very helpful information because we know where the pain points are in the plan. And then when we identify and the number of requests that the administrator gets. So we do get reports from them, and it gives us a sense of how the implementation is going. Then we have research and analysis done for the Partners Committee on the various areas of the plan, mostly what is newer. We have this sector progresses at such a high speed that we have experts coming and discussing with us. And then bargaining agents, through their own consultations with their members, bring what they think are the key elements, and we look We also have discussions internally with the employer and certain experts in the system to see what would also respond to needs. I'll give you the example of mental health. We saw the trend, the disability leaves. So with the community, we knew that this was an issue that we had an opportunity to better address through these negotiations. So this is how we collect in addition to the benchmarking study and the analysis of what is made available elsewhere. That's what informs the negotiations.
Thank you. Whose idea was it to implement a manual enrollment process, please, rather than the industry standard automatic enrollment process?
I don't know if I would say idea. Also, and in part, as a part of an is obligation the right term? Not sure. But as we were changing administrator, when it was made clear that it was Canada Life that had won, we knew that there was privacy issue and information, personal information, that could not be transferred from one person to another. 1.7 million. Some have retired. Some are our dependents that are now out of school, that are no longer covered by the plan. Some are deceased, unfortunately. So all of that, we had to make sure that we had a clean slate and a base of information to implement the new plan. And that's why pre-enrollment is part of the reasons pre-enrollment was done.
Were you able to have any consultations with Sun Life, or was Canada Life, pardon me, able to have any consultations with Sun Life to ensure that the transition was smooth for public servants?
To my knowledge, yes. Sun Life and Canada Life were in touch, and as part of the many committees during the implementation phase, the 18-month, both companies had interactions to ensure that smooth which ended up not being so smooth, before you say it, transition.
Sure. And were you aware of any breakdowns in communication that led to the numerous issues that we've seen throughout the last 5 months?
Breakdown in communications?
I would say there were no breakdown in communications that the Government of Canada is aware of. What we were seeing was unanticipated volume of calls, and I think you'll hear from Canada Life as well that, to the best of their knowledge, they were anticipating call volumes that were similar to what Sun Life had faced, and these were many times that as of July 1st.
Thank you. Is there a standard government practice in ensuring those who are receiving benefits are meant to be on the plan?
I'm sorry, Madam Couche, I'm not sure I understood your question.
Yeah, no problem. Relative to the implementation of the manual enrollment process, how do you ensure that those who are meant to receive benefits do in fact receive the benefits? Is there a way to bridge the gap, or to ensure that the gap is bridged?
And you're going to have to provide that in writing to us, please. Thank you, Chair. Mr. Kuzmierczak, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you so much for being here today on this important issue. I do have a question for Ms. Archambault, and that is, it was mentioned that one of the benefits of retendering the contract is that it's an opportunity to introduce new technology or new innovation, perhaps, or best practices. I'm not sure if I'm directing the question to the appropriate person, but would you be able to maybe speak about some of the new technology innovation that this retendering process has introduced to the plan?
Yeah, I think Treasury Board would be better for that, but I can say, however, that we did a lot of industry consultation when we were defining the requirement. So they were all involved to help everybody define these requirements.
Part of the retendering process was to improve the contract in the area of fraud detection, auditing and reporting, greening government, and opportunities for Indigenous Canadians under the new Public Service Healthcare Plan administrative contract as well.
Can you maybe unpackage that for us a little bit, what that means? Maybe provide an example?
Sure. So there were criteria, of course, under the former administrator to provide reporting and auditing. However, there was another level of fraud management from a digital perspective, using artificial intelligence, for example, in order to identify cases where claims may be fraudulent. Greening government, moving our plan membership with 1.7 million individuals to mostly digital, still offering, of course, the opportunity for paper claims processing, especially for our retired members who seem to enjoy that, but really making it more easy for our plan members to take advantage of the digital aspects.
So this was definitely us taking a digital leap. Is that fair to say with this new program, this new tender?
Absolutely.
It's interesting. In another committee, we actually studied the impact of AI on workers, and I hadn't considered the impact that it might have on a public service health plan. So thank you very much for sharing that information. What are some of the unique challenges that you would say to operating this particular plan?
Sure. Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. So this is an extremely complex plan. It's not only large in terms of membership, but it's demographically spread out across Canada. We have a central national capital region where a number of our members reside, but they're across Canada and rural regions as well. Access to medical professionals is not always equitable across the country. It's also an extremely complex benefit plan. And this is why it is extremely important that we find a plan administrator who can adjudicate the claims and deal with a unique plan membership. So it is complex, it's widespread, and it's the largest plan in Canada.
How many companies in Canada would you say, I mean, ballpark it, have the capacity to be able to fulfill this such a plan, the complexity of it, to the standards that we expect? I'm just curious.
I wouldn't want to try to guess, but besides the largest known ones, there aren't that many that actually have the infrastructure and the capacity to deliver it. They do complement their service offer with expertise of smaller companies, and that's why it gives opportunities now to Indigenous companies, but some that are specialized in different area, to work with them in the delivery, but it's usually quite large businesses that apply for those contracts.
I will yield my time. Thank you, Chair.
Oh. Wonderful. Seeing as Mr. Kuzmierczuk has yielded 10 seconds to me, do you mind if I ask you a couple quick questions? Would you be able to provide to the committee, you mentioned there's 50 added benefits, would you be able to provide to the committee the added benefits, but also perhaps the drugs and the benefits taken away? And also, there were a lot of items we left for you to respond back to the committee. Our committee has passed a motion requiring all of those within 3 weeks from today. We appreciate it. We will excuse you. Thanks very much for joining us today. Colleagues, we've got Canada Life on the line already to go, so we're only going to suspend for about 5 or 10 seconds. We will have bells at 5:15. I'm hoping we'll have agreement. We can work through the bells to get in the full rounds with Canada Life, if that's okay. Witnesses, you are excused. Suspended for a few seconds.
and it is our honor to support them. We know that the transition has not been smooth for all members of the Public Service Healthcare Plan. Before I pass it to my colleague T, let me just say, to those who had a poor service experience in recent months, we are sorry.
Thank you, Ryan. La Canada Vie est le plus important fournisseur.
Canada Life is the largest benefits provider in Canada. We take the trust that Canadians place in us very seriously. Our success is rooted in our ability to provide personalized and dedicated service to our customers. Let's be clear. Over the past few months, the service some plan members and their families received did not meet their expectations, nor our expectations. Their experience is unacceptable. We have been working tirelessly with the Government of Canada to resolve the situation. The Public Service Healthcare Plan is the government's benefit plan. As a promoter of the plan, it's the government that designs the plan and determines the benefits and the protections for members. Canada Life administers the plan, and its role is to direct the plan according to the agreement. When Canada Life began to administer the regime or the plan, the transition was the very first of its kind in Canada. The scale and size of the plan makes it unique in Canada. It provides health benefits to over 1.7 million Canadians, including federal public servants, retirees, and their family members. The transition of the plan to Canada Life was the largest transition of a benefits plan in Canadian history. It came with real-time challenges, some of which were not anticipated. We also recognize that there were significant changes for plan members taking place at the same time as the transition to Canada Life. This included benefit and coverage limit changes to the plan and plan limits that were implemented on the 1st of July. The significant number of changes resulted in thousands of calls to our call centers, leading to long wait times and service disruptions. Regardless of what caused these challenges, we have been trying to fix them so that members and their families can access the benefits they are entitled to. Our goal is still to ensure that every eligible claim is paid and that we provide exceptional service to our customers.
To reiterate our ongoing commitment to making this right. As part of this commitment, Canada Life implemented a customer service action plan. This reduced call center wait times, it accelerated claims payment, and it escalated urgent cases. This included, as noted previously, extending call center hours to 7 days a week, doubling our call center agents, and adding more claims examiners. It also included introducing urgent escalation process channels to identify and resolve special cases. We've also worked hard to be transparent to plan members throughout this period, publicly posting our progress on improving service standards and updating frequently asked questions on a regular basis. Our action plan is working. Call wait times, as noted, are now an average of within approximately 1 to 3 minutes, and claims are being processed within approximately 2 days. Our top priority now is maintaining service levels so that all public service healthcare plan members...
wrap up, Mr. Weiss.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Continue to get access to their benefits, and we are working with the government to prepare for these upcoming changes that they have made to the plan to take effect on January 1st. For over 175 years, Canadians have trusted Canada Life to deliver on its promises, and we take that very seriously. We now look forward to answering any questions the committee may have. Thank you, and merci.
Thank you, Ms. Weiss. Mrs. Cusi, please, for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much to our witnesses from Canada Life for being here today. I'll open by saying the same thing I said to your governmental counterparts, that as you've indicated, this is a serious issue that has had a significant impact on public servants, those who have served Canada, and their families. And I wanted to provide a couple more stories that we have seen in the media testifying the difficult time that these families have been through. The first one is from Sabrina Hoke. Aidan Clark III was diagnosed with global developmental delay when he was 3 months old. He receives weekly speech therapy, occupational therapy, and physiotherapy. With a $1,500 cap on physiotherapy, his parents aren't sure they'll be able to provide him the care he needs. I'm determined I'm not going to change his plan, his mother told the CBC. It's a stress and it's very frustrating. She spends about $400 per month for the regular physiotherapy, plus another $1,650 for intensive physiotherapy every 4 months. So far, knock on wood, within 3 years, there's been no regression, and that's been because we've kept a steady pace. We've been very determined. We've been on the ball with making sure that he gets weekly physiotherapy sessions. But she said the physiotherapy cap has had a dramatic effect on the family's lives. We're left hung to dry, she said. We're hitting a wall already with the non-existent customer service. When we push through that wall, we connect to someone to be hit with another wall where there's no exception for families who are dealing with lifelong challenges. This one is from Allison Abraham. She has not been able to submit her medication for Crohn's disease through Canada Life, and she worries the drug company will stop paying for it because she's supposed to have medical insurance. When the government switched to Canada Life, we are promised seamless transfer of insurance. It has been nothing but a pain, though. One of my life-saving drugs is about $20,000 per injection, which I get every 8 weeks. Without this drug, I would be bedridden and dying. Unfortunately, since the insurance switch, I do not have coverage. I spent countless hours calling to make sure my coverage is active, but still can't process anything via their website or the pharmacy. Thankfully, they've offered me temporary relief in order to get my medication. It's infuriating I'm having to rely on a service that people who actually don't have coverage use because my insurance provider can't get it together. I fear every time I order my medication that this will be the last time that it's covered. So my first question for Canada Life, please, is did you have a discussion with the resource requirements, with the government prior to the July 1st implementation?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to the honourable member's question. Certainly, we've discussed in the previous testimony as well the 18-month startup period in which there was significant collaboration with the government to ensure that we were working through a lot of the deliverables and being ready for that July 1st date. Resource discussions were not a significant part of that discussion, although we had done our own estimates based off of many of the historical points of data that were provided within the request for proposal from the previous contractor. As noted several times, the complexity of the change and the quantity of changes that happened at the July 1st transition date did lead, unfortunately, to a number of calls and service issues that were unforeseeable. And it was the addition of all those changes together that created these unforeseeable challenges. Regardless of that, we acted quickly and in collaboration with the government to enact our customer service action plan. And to that, we have increased our call center agents and increased our claims examiners. Certainly, we know people are frustrated and the individual circumstances cited there do not meet the service standards that we would expect. But our customer service action plan has been working now, and we are being able to take calls within 1 to 3 minutes. And certainly we are committed to processing every eligible claim within the 2-day period that we have now.
Thank you. Is it the standard practice of Canada Life to require manual enrollment when switching between plan administrators?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to the honourable member's question. We understand that the government had the objective of completing a full re-enrollment in order to clean up a lot of the enrollment data and to make sure we had everyone eligible on the plan. We understand that was cited, of course, very publicly in the contract, and it was when we worked towards throughout that startup period. On the rest of our contracts, typically this is not a standard practice, but again, the plan of the PSHCP is very unique. And as cited by Treasury Board earlier in their testimony, the dispersion and the high number of people who are all across the country and some even posted abroad did necessitate a look at a manual re-enrollment process.
So then, in your estimation, what was the overall impact on call times and claims processing because of the use of manual enrollment, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to the question. The initial re-enrollment and manual re-enrollment period was certainly the driver of a majority of calls in the early parts of the contract. There were some people who were not able to access their benefit at that time, and so we worked collaboratively with the government again to quickly enact the first part of our action plan, and that was to complete an accelerated enrollment to auto-enroll all remaining members. Once that was completed, call volumes dropped significantly, and it stopped becoming the significant and major issue that we were facing in our contact centers.
And for what period of time would you say that this was a significant percentile of your calls, the adjustment for the manual enrollment, please?
Very brief answer, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For really most of the summer months, so the first 2 months of the contract, this was the majority issue, but it did begin to subside from there come September.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Mr. Pawlowski, please, for 6 minutes.
The government officials, when they were here earlier, when they talked about the goals of the new revised plan, one of the things they listed was more opportunities for Indigenous Canadians. I thought that was interesting because the one complaint I personally heard about Canada Life was from an Indigenous friend who works in the civil service, who he immediately had a problem in that apparently Canada Life was telling him that it should be non-insured health benefits that pay for his medications, not Canada Life. And the opposite, the non-insured health benefits said, no, that should be Canada Life. Apparently that's been sorted out, but what was the problem there, and do there continue to be problems with Indigenous people and their coverage and what they get under non-insured health benefits versus your plan?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair, and to the honourable member. And I cannot comment on the specifics of the individual case without those specifics, and certainly would not want to do so publicly. I will comment broadly and will offer as well, if you want to take it offline, we'd be happy to look into this issue, even though you've noted it seems to be resolved. That said, we are committed to administering the plan as per the plan directive, as per the contract, and that does include coordinating between other programs, whether they be government or the NIHB, as it's known, as you've cited. And we are working hard to make sure members understand that and can answer their questions.
Thank you. So I heard of this one instance, but probably there are other similar instances where people within their family have another member of the family being covered, for example, a spouse who also has insurance. I personally am not in that category, but is that a problem, and has that changed under the new plan? Because again, like I know people often, for example, under your plan, my family's covered, but under my spouse's plan, perhaps I'm covered as well. So has that changed since we've changed from over to Canada Life?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And to the question from the honourable member, no, in short, that has not changed. That is industry practice for us to essentially coordinate benefits, is the term, between other programs if other coverage is available. And there are industry standard guidelines which dictate which coverage prioritizes others. It was also one of the objectives of that enrollment process to collect good data and refresh all the data on where other coverage existed. So it was one of the main objectives as people went through that process to not only confirm contact information, details around their members and dependents that might be covered, but also to make sure they would cite whether they had other coverage so we could coordinate that seamlessly and automatically. So we did achieve some good objectives there in cleaning that up, and it was certainly to the betterment of members that we have accurate information on coordinating benefits.
Hopefully in my remaining time, I can ask on a couple of specifics. So as a longtime doctor, I'm more familiar on being the other side of the stretcher. But as occasionally someone who's used the healthcare system, I've been frustrated with some of the payments that I've had to make, which I thought were covered. One, ambulance. I was surprised when I got a bill once for an ambulance ride. Another one is maternity benefits, which there always seems to be gaps in our government-provided coverage. And the third one is physio, which actually Ms. Kusi brought up. I thought you actually increased the benefits from physio.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I understand the member's question of whether we did increase the benefits or not, a couple points of clarification. First, most importantly, it was the government's decision, obviously, through their process and through the negotiated collective bargaining process to set that standard. And I think there was good discussion had there from the Government of Canada in the earlier testimony and how that was done and how it was collaborated with, for example, industry bodies and association bodies. Second, I do believe the change there, as was noted earlier, was not a reduction in benefits, but rather an adjustment, whereas previously people had that corridor of benefits that was an unlimited amount. And then through that collective bargain process, it was adjusted down to a cap of $1,500. So again, I cannot comment on the efficacy of that, but certainly as the administrator, we are committed to adjudicating all claims per the new negotiated agreement and in accordance with those provisions.
And do you know anything about maternity benefits?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do not believe there was any changes to the maternity benefits as part of that program. We can, and as it was cited earlier, we can certainly share the 43 changes that were made effective on July 1st. But to my knowledge, I do not believe there were any changes made to maternity.
So can you perhaps, and Mr. Weiss, I think you'd rather tell us about what's better in the new plan than the old plan rather than what's worse in the new plan. So maybe I'll give you the minute to tell us what else we're getting under your plan, which perhaps we didn't get under the old plan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And then an important point of clarification. The plan, of course, is the Government of Canada's plan. We are simply administering it as a contract holder. But I do think, it might be better to document those full outlines of the improvements. I do know, as a bit of a reference and for context, there was some addition made specifically to gender-affirming care. That was the first time that was introduced under this plan. And Treasury Board spoke a little bit about the consultation they had with various groups in the community to support that. I do know as well there were increases in some other benefits amounts. For example, we've talked a little bit about physiotherapy, but there are increases in other paramedical amounts to modernize the plan.
Mr. Weiss, I'm afraid that is our time, but perhaps we can get back to it in the next round. Mrs. Vignola, please, for 6.
Merci beaucoup, monsieur.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, Mr. Weiss, Madam Vo. Thank you for being with us this evening. A while ago, you said that there had been some surprises during the transition and that you had to recruit more people. How many employees were assigned to the administration of the plan on the 1st of July, and how many are assigned today?
Votre micro.
Your microphone, Madam Vo. I'm sorry. Mr. Chair, thank you for your question. I will ask Mr. Weiss to answer that question. He'll be able to give you more details when it comes to recruitment.
Ms. Vu, and to answer the question of the honourable member, we have increased the amount of people we have supporting this plan from the July 1st date until where we project on January 1st by several hundred additional people. Those comprise primarily additional agents to process claims more efficiently and also additional agents to answer calls in a more expeditious fashion. So again, several hundred more people have been recruited to the plan since we started in July 1st.
OK. Donc, c'est beau de dire plusieurs...
It's nice to see several hundred more people have been recruited. But when we are talking about this plan, now there's about 700 people now. How many people did you have at the beginning, and how many employees would you have later? How many do you have now? Mr. Chair, thank you for the question. At Canada Life, we are committed to providing excellent service to our customers under this plan in the 2 official languages of their choice. Today, service levels... Question. I'm sorry, I don't want to be impolite. I ask for figures. If you don't have the figures, I'll accept the response. We don't have them now. I am able to accept that response, and then I could ask you to provide the figures later. That's all. But I don't like you going around the question. Thank you. Talking about Francophones now, you all know that Francophones have had great difficulty with Canada Life, And when we talk about health, we like to speak in our own official language. Is it possible for you to tell me how many people have now been recruited who are able to give proper answers to Francophones? If you are not able to do so now, please, can you give me the figures later on? Thank you for your question, Mr. Chair. We will offer you those figures after the meeting. Thank you very much. You also talked about difficulties that were unexpected encountered during the transition period, which you are still encountering. Could you name one or two of those difficulties which increased the number of calls and which also delayed claims processing? Thank you very much for that question, Mr. Chair. Indeed, as was mentioned already, there were a number of factors that increased the wait times. And that was because there were lots of simultaneous changes taking place at the same time as a transition. Question, I'm talking about unexpected events because there were many changes. That was expected. That was part of the negotiation process. But what were the unexpected difficulties that were encountered during the transition? Answer. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for that question. Let me give you an example. In July, it's the quantity, the size, the number of calls that we received that was unexpected. For example, on the 1st of July, those calls were 8 times what the former provider received. So it's really the quantity of calls that surprised us. Thank you. Personally, I don't understand how this was a surprise because the plan was being changed and the conditions of the plan were changing, so you should have expected calls. Maybe I'm the one who doesn't understand what is going on. Mr. Vice, a while ago, you said there was no reduction in coverage for physiotherapy, but there was a readjustment for many families that need to do physiotherapy sessions every week. Well, when you talk about readjustment and reduction, is it the same thing?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To the honourable member's question, certainly we are just administering the program as per the plan directive and the negotiated changes. I probably wouldn't be in the best position to comment on whether that was perceived positively or negatively. But we do know that some members are frustrated with the changes and certainly have been working collaboratively with the government to not only increase the level of understanding of those changes in communication, but to give people avenues and escalated support if they have continued questions so that we can help them understand the new plan provisions and how they may work through that.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. Mr. Johns, please, for 6.
So a question I had earlier for the panel before. Can you confirm that there is no gaps in terms of benefits, like that you're equal to or better than the previous plan under Sun Life?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's an important question from the member. To ours. I think that's been talked about a little bit, but again, to reiterate.
Can I interrupt, Mr. Weiss? We lost you there for a few seconds. Can you just start the sentence from the beginning?
My apologies. Can you hear me okay now?
Loud and clear.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to be clear. We do know the plan did change from the previous administrator to now ours administered by Canada Life. We talked about the negotiated changes, of which there were several, some to improve and augment the plan and modernize it, some, of course, to perhaps change some of the coverage levels. So I'm not sure it's an appropriate comparison between the two to say there were no gaps in coverage. But we are administering completely to the plan directive and to all the coverage and benefit levels that have been negotiated through the collective bargaining process.
Would it be possible for you to identify what shortfalls to the previous plan that you are hearing from your clients?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and absolutely. I think we can also supplement to the committee some further details outlining all the different changes, if that would be helpful. But just for context and a couple examples here, we have talked about the physiotherapy one at length. Perhaps another good example would be where allowed in certain provinces, there was an introduction of a cap on the dispensing fee that is paid for certain drugs.
Okay. Would it be possible, Mr. Chair, if I can get support from the committee to ask that in writing by January 15th to the committee?
Absolutely, Mr. Chair.
Great. Thank you, everybody. What compensation can we expect for those who suffered because of your inability to process benefits in a timely way? And I'm thinking in terms of, there were single parents that had to put their children's medications on credit cards, incurring interest while waiting for weeks or months even for reimbursement.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And to the question from the honourable member, I want to start by saying we do know that people were very frustrated by some of the transition issues. And we do know that the service that some members expect and the families received did not meet their expectations nor ours. And we've been working very hard to fix that. I've talked a little bit about our customer service action plan, and we have most of those issues now behind us with call center wait times between 1 to 3 minutes and the ability to pay claims within about 2.2 days. I think to the honourable member's specific element, what has been most helpful in those cases is our urgent escalation process, whereby if a member was experiencing financial hardship or felt they hadn't had their eligible claim processed, they can reach out to us. And there we would take an escalated process to make sure we reached out to that member and move their inquiry right to the top of the line. That was very helpful, and we were very public about that when we were behind on claim processing times to make sure those that might have experienced that hardship, if they had to, for example, put some of their payments on their credit card, that we could accelerate those and prioritize them for quick and prompt payment.
Okay, that's if they can get through. Now, we hear that significant problems persist for public servants posted abroad. You touched on this a little bit earlier, or for those who have emergency claims well out of the country. What are the processing times for these claims? And many of these claims are for urgent issues and can cost many thousands of dollars. How are you going to fix that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just for context to the question, of course, the coverage provided to members and to Canadians posted abroad in the public service is a very important one, but also one of the most complex elements of the public service healthcare plan. We know it's complex, of course, because we would have different jurisdictions to handle, different medical centers in each and every country. Forms may be different and payments will be made in local currencies. As a result of that, our customer service action plan has outlined improvements specific to those posted abroad. And while the service standards there are still not up to our expectations, we are working hard to improve them. We know one of the key elements, as you touched on, was prioritizing emergency claims and emergency issues. And I want to be clear that if a member calls today, we are absolutely prioritizing those of an emergency nature. And if a member has a claim that needs to be paid, that needs to be escalated, we do, as I note, have an urgent escalation process for them to put that in an expedited fashion for processing.
I actually want to go there. We've seen articles in the media. We've heard from our constituents about very serious conditions being exasperated by the situation. People with cancer not getting their drugs in a timely way, or people with serious neurological conditions not having access to the medicine they need. I've got Tom from Hornby Island, a constituent of mine, who's having issues, obtaining his wife's life-saving medications. He reached out to my office because his wife only had 6 days left of heart medication left. And during the health switchover, their prescription coverage was cut off. Canada Life decided BC residents on the pharmacare program should have pharmacare paid for first by them before Canada Life pays. Now, this should have been a smooth process because Sun Life had all their information. Now, Tom was distressed and wondering why Canada Life had cut off his medication coverage, and our office had to urgently request your company solve the issue so Tom's wife could access her medication. This is unacceptable, and I guess maybe you can help me understand how you're going to fix this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And to the honourable member's question, again, I want to reiterate that we do know people were frustrated by some of the issues they had experienced during the transition. For that example in particular, while I can't comment on the specific situation, we did work with members of Parliament and our partners in the Government of Canada to implement an escalation process as well for those who have had members come into their constituency office and maybe face serious or urgent issues such as that cited. That process has worked quite well since July.
I have to cut you off there, Mr. Weiss, but Mr. Johns will have another round, and perhaps you can finish off then. Ms. Block, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and welcome to our witnesses from Canada Life. I want to go back to the opening comments of Ms. Royds, where she noted that the contract is for administrative services and that it included a startup phase of 18 months for Canada Life to take the necessary steps to prepare to administer the plan. My assumption is that that happened before the operations phase began July 1st, 2023, and you can confirm that when I'm done asking my question. She went on to say that as with any large switch from one service provider to another, especially on programs of this magnitude, issues with transition are not unexpected and are therefore planned for by all parties. We've heard throughout the testimony today that there were some things that may not have been planned for well. And I'm wondering if you could provide to the committee what Canada Life proposed in regards to the benchmarks or milestones for its integrated schedule for the startup phase. I know, Mr. Weiss, that you're, in response to another question, you advised that resource discussions did not take place. But what did Canada Life put in place in order to prepare to take over this contract in your integrated schedule for startup phase?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. And to the honourable member, first, I can confirm your assumption was correct. The 18-month startup phase was the immediate 18 months preceding the July 1st operations ready date. To the second question on what in our integrated schedule the specific milestones were in a preparation, for context, I will pick the highlights. The integrated schedule was over 3,000 lines long and was quite detailed to make sure we could capture progress against all the specific requirements of the contract. That being said, the major elements of the integrated startup phase focused around the positive enrollment period, which had a defined period that began on towards the end of March, my apologies, and continued right up until July 1st and tracking those major deliverables. A second major one was all of the systems that needed to be built, tested by the contractor, which in this case was Treasury Board, and brought into production for that July 1st date. There were also significant milestones around the audit and claims verification program, ensuring our contact center and our claims processing systems were all online and ready, and of course, the screening of all personnel by the industrial security process as administered by the Government of Canada. Each of those milestones were tracked rigorously, and there was weekly reporting back to the project authority, and as noted earlier, collaboration between both parties, often on a daily basis, to make sure that we were tracking well to that schedule.
Thank you very much. In her remarks, Ms. Royds also commented on where you are today, but I would like to provide you with the opportunity to advise us if the heightened workload from the changeover has decreased to a level that was expected for the ongoing service level for the plan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And to the question from the honourable member, we have not yet seen a return to the levels that was expected or has been historically experienced from the previous administrator. That said, we are achieving our target service levels now with the increased resourcing we have brought on board over the last several months. One of the reasons we believe that it has not returned to levels expected yet, although it will in the future, is that there are still some additional plan design changes to come into force for the membership. The major one of those still remaining would happen in January, and where we've talked about earlier around generic drugs, the utilization of generic drug substitution will come into force for those who had brand name drugs before July 1st. We do anticipate that will generate a significant number of calls, but we are increasing our resourcing to help support it.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm wondering if you have any details or stats on how often doctor recommendations for non-generic drugs are accepted.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. I do not have those figures handy at this point. We'd be happy to provide them to the committee. More importantly, we are administering those exception requests, excuse me, based on the specific provisions set forth by
Please
the
feel
plan
free
directive.
to help yourself to water if you need to.
Thank you. My apologies again. The point I was making there was that we are administering per the directive and per the guidelines set out by the government on those forms.
Thank you very
Mrs.
much.
Block.
Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Baines, go ahead.
Talk a long time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you to Mr. Weiss and Ms. Vu for joining us today, and Mr. Weiss, for recognizing on numerous times, the challenges and owning up to some of the maybe mistakes or that took place along the way in this transition. You mentioned that there's going to be some time to get to the required achievement levels, just in your previous answer there. How long do you think that will take to get to the required achievement levels that previous provider had?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. I want to qualify perhaps some of my comments there. We do expect to achieve target service levels much sooner than the actual volumes would have achieved from the previous contract. So to be clear, we do have the resourcing now to improve our contact center and wait times, as noted previously, and we do expect to see that from here on out. What I was referring to in the previous question was that the volumes of calls will not recede to historical standards until we are through many of these plan design changes.
And do you have numbers, like timelines, target dates that you're working on? What have you have a team of people, what have you assigned to them?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We do expect post the January change and the last major change there to be within target service standards. So again, we've talked about those there, which is continuing to answer calls within 1 to 3 minutes and paying claims within about 2 to 3 business days. So again, I want to be clear. After that January cutover period, we do expect to be within target services. We do still expect elevated volumes. However, we are staffed to handle those, and those volumes will continue to decrease to what we project in late 2024 to return to historical standards.
So late 2024. Okay. I mean, there's always challenges with large...
Sorry, let me interrupt you there, Mr. Baines. We have, you will have your time. We have the bells ringing. Can we have consent to continue? Majid, you're saying yes, or would you like to speak?
Yeah, I'd like to speak. Okay, so no unanimous consent. We agreed to have 2.5 minutes for block, 2.5 minutes for NDP, and pass the budget and then adjourn.
You're fine?
No, I'm not giving unanimous consent to that. If you give time
Is
to
that
the
or we
block
just-
and the...
Is that or we just send it? So you're saying after Mr. Baines
Yeah.
block NDP and then
But
we're
don't I
done?
get one...
What's that or?
Yeah, to be honest with you, we just heard that the UC that was going to give us a little bit of break in the middle of the vote tonight got rejected. So we need to...
This UC or different UC?
No, the different
Okay.
UC. So
Well,
we really need...
They're bringing
it's
in here,
that
so why
or
should
we
I
end
give
right,
it to that?
It's that
no.
or we end right now.
No.
Do you want to end right now? Right now?
Mr. Johns?
I'm going to try to negotiate here. Why don't the Liberals just eat their 5 minutes? That way Ms. Kuzi gets her 5, we get our 2.5 each, and then we're done 5 minutes early. Please, let's just get through this if we could.
Sensible solution from Mr. Johns.
Thanks, guys. We are adjourned then.
Good try, Gord.
you.